Police officers around the world continue to contact me asking me for advice on a good duty blade. Now, for a long time in the Nutnfancy project, hello, this is Nutnfancy again, I've had available on my channel page Best Tactical Folders playlist, which includes all my formally reviewed tactical folding knives of all varieties, which I think would serve well for police officers, soldiers, even civilian sheepdogs that need such a blade. I think a lot of guys miss that playlist. Maybe I'll make a separate one labeled Best Cop Blades. There'll be a lot of duplication between the two because I think it's pretty much the same POU. And that's going to be the philosophy of this vid, or the theme I should say, Best Cop Blades. And we will talk to the specifics as we go along here. But before we do, we need to understand what we want from our cop blade. Okay, and before I do that, let's talk about marketing hype. Okay, just because it wears a moniker like Lawman or Police Model or Tactical such and such, don't bite off on that and think that it's going to be the absolute best blade for you. Let's look at some advertisements in a knife magazine here. And again, these are just random, but some of them are pretty funny. But here's one. This one's from Black Hawk. I love this one. It's hilarious. Here it shows a bad guy in the darkness with a baseball bat. And then we have our intrepid hero packing his little tiny Black Hawk tactical knife. Okay, actually that's a pretty stout blade, I have no doubt. Again, I'm always about the reach. I know some guys disagree with that. They're like, oh no man, a small blade's a lot more maneuverable, can do a lot of damage. Whatever, I want reach. Especially if I'm going against this guy with a baseball bat, I think this guy's going to win. Yeah, look at the reach he has. I don't think you're going to compare. That's a pretty funny ad. There's a lot of ads that target military and police officers. Here's another one. You know, a knife against the backdrop of an AR-15. That's telling, saying, hey, if you're tactical, you will have this knife. I don't like that blade, by the way. I don't like the chisel grind on it. I hate chisel ground blades. Too short. Don't like the serrations. That's just an initial impression. People are going to say, well, review that. I want to hear about it. See, here's another one. This one, you know, it shows a tank in the background. Serious knives. Missions are serious. If you're serious, you'll have this knife. A lot of hype. You know, and I'm seeing this more and more, too. Is, you know, they're doing those really funky grind patterns to set themselves apart. I think a lot of this is not for function. You know, it really isn't. I think a lot of it is for visual appeal to the buyer. That's why they're doing this. You know, like the Lawman has, it's a drop point blade, very proven blade design, both for utility and defensive purposes. They're just getting, this is a ZT 0400, Zero Tolerance by Kershaw. You know, some guys will dig that blade shape. Not so much me. I think it's mostly for hype. So just because it wears a Lawman moniker or whatnot doesn't mean it's good. It also doesn't mean it's bad. And I'll reference the outstanding Police G10 by Spyderco, previously reviewed in the Nutnfancy project. How you doing? If I think about it, you'll see annotation there. I absolutely love this knife. And it is called a Police Model. And it's a big blade. 4 3/8 inch blade, VG10 flat ground steel. I want to cover all the specifics because I already did it in the tabletop. I love this blade. And this is going to typify what I call the first type of police officer's knife. And that is one that is designed for, let's say, for lack of a better term, killing bad guys. Okay? It is an emergency defensive tool, tactical folder in the truest sense, to be deployed when everything else fails and the police officer's life is in danger. And this is what he wants to draw, or she, draw from the pocket and save their lives. I think, like I spoke in this review, the Police G10 would serve quite well in that. It's a little bit slower to deploy because of physics. You know, the deployment hole's kind of on the back of the fulcrum where we pivot, but still pretty easy. Locks tight, flat blade. Not overly heavy, but not overly light. It's a 5-ounce knife, and again, we are getting something for that weight. Getting a very strong blade, a long blade, much better reach than that little Black Hawk blade we saw in that advertisement. So this is the first type of police officer's knife. A very good example of such, where it would be designed to be used as an emergency defensive tool. Another example of that would be, also reviewed in the Nutnfancy project, the Cold Steel Recon 1. This is a very large, not very large, but a larger folding tactical knife. And it works on the same principle. It's designed to have a fair amount of reach, good strength in the locking mechanism. Both of these are strong locks. And I might annotate this as well. 6.4 ounces though. It's going to be a bigger knife. And it's very similar in a lot of ways to the American Lawman by Cold Steel. We'll talk about some similarities here. What do you give up by going with bigger blades like this if you're looking for a police officer's knife? You're going to give up weight. Okay, before you guys start rolling your eyes again, going, here goes Nutnfancy talking about weight again. Most police officers in my cohorts in the law enforcement community, we talk about this all the time, carry a lot of freaking gear around their belt. Okay, a lot. Some of it adding up to around a 35-pound carry weight when you include body armor. I mean, around the circumference of most cops, you'll see handcuffs, radios, pepper spray, asbatons, tasers of various makes and models, additional magazines, ammunition carriers, maybe a multi-tool. There's a lot going on the belt of the average, at least United States police officer. So much so that it's very probable that in later years with a long career, you are going to have back problems. Okay? I'm going somewhere with this, trust me. Back to these knives, the larger ones. If we're going to carry a 6 ounce or 5.5 ounce blade, I know that doesn't break the bank, but it all adds up. So what do you trade off? You trade off lightweight, and you're carrying more weight around it, around your belt there, maybe in your pocket. It really doesn't matter. It's the same place essentially. And I think you're going to give up some utility. A large blade like this is not as good of an EDC blade, in my opinion, as perhaps a smaller one. Let's roll in the Benchmade Mini Griptilian, previously reviewed in the Nutnfancy project. Again, great EDC blade. Super light, 2.6 ounces. This gets into the second kind of cop blade, in my opinion. One that is more of an EDC blade. And honestly, I'm so anal with my blades, I gotta wipe it off. Honestly, one that police officers are going to use more, truth be told. It's going to be a rare occasion that a police officer accesses his pocket to draw out his duty knife to defend his life. Look at the statistics, and it happens. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but it's kind of rare, and not so rare that I wouldn't carry one. Trust me, that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about two different philosophies of knife carriage for a police officer. We can go big defensive blade, or we can sacrifice some defensiveness and maybe gain a lot more in utility by going with something smaller. Maybe the mini grip is a way we could go. Another great knife, it's been in my best tactical folder playlist for a long time now, is the outstanding Benchmade 940. In my communications with my very valuable and beloved TMPers around the world, I often mention this knife. Nutnfancy, what do you recommend as the best, I don't know, insert whatever you want, backpacking blade, best everyday carry blade, best lightweight tactical folder that's fast, lightweight, strong, good steel, Benchmade 940. Yet again, I love this knife. Comes in different colorations. Some guys are bummed out that they can't find the red one that I showed in the review. And yes, I did review this in the Nutnfancy project. This is a staple folding everything blade at TMP. It really is. By that I mean it can fill so many functions. Okay, so let's go on with a theme. So we have our large police officer knife, then we go with a smaller one. Do we give up something in defensive capability? Yeah, we do. We give up some reach, maybe a little bit of strength, and I'm just using the Recon 1 as an example. Perhaps. But the Benchmade, just taking this example, the Benchmade 940 still has about the same reach as a Recon 1, doesn't have the same chord or width of the blade per se, therefore, on paper, maybe it won't shear as much. I think, though, the differences will be kind of minuscule. That's just me. I could be wrong. And in giving up, or I'm sorry, in going with a smaller blade, we gain something, and that is a very light carry weight, 3 ounces. 3.2, whatever this is, Benchmade 940, yeah, 3 ounces. Lightweight blade, multifunctional, still deadly if needed. No, it's not the best tactical blade. You know, we don't have good jimping here, as I previously criticized it on, nor on the underside. So we could go ingress, or in other words, slip onto the cutting blade if we did a piercing attack, thrust attack. Keep that in mind. Great police officer knife right here, the Benchmade 940, kind of along the school of more of an EDC, smaller blade, yet could still be deadly if employed correctly. Another good one, the SOG Flash 1, also already reviewed. I sound like a broken record, don't I? SOG Flash 1, outstanding all-around knife, just like the 940. It's super light, like 3.5 ounces, 3.3 ounces. The SOG Flash 2, if I said Flash 1, I was wrong. Flash 2 knife, and it's got that flat ground, AUS-8 blade. Love it. Good utility shape, not too big that we can't cut our donuts with it, sandwiches, whatever you got going. Again, what you're most likely to be using your knife for are non-defensive encounters or situations. Great blade. See the two different schools of thought? You need to decide what's more important to you. Do you want to carry a bigger blade and have more cutting capability? Maybe go with something lighter. Have just about the same cutting capability, but it's going to be easier to carry, or easier to carry and easier on your back. Does this argument sound somewhat familiar? It should. I'm talking mobility versus firepower. It's a thing I often address on many different items. Knives, guns, tactical gear, outdoor gear, you name it. If you want firepower, you're going to take something bigger. It's going to be heavier. It's going to take up more space. Maybe you go mobility, maybe give up absolute cutting performance for a big gain in portability and comfort in carry. And let's talk about that. If it's comfortable, police officers, you're going to carry it. If it's not, you are probably going to find yourself leaving it at home. Now, bear with me, civilians. I'm talking more to my police officers right now, but you guys will be saying, well, I don't have a problem carrying my Recon 1. But remember, we're talking about cops that are carrying a lot of gear on their belt, so every ounce counts. Finally, let's roll in the American Lawman by Cold Steel. Where does it fall along these two schools of thought? Firepower, mobility. I think it's kind of squarely in between, actually, and I think it is actually a pretty good police officer choice. I do. There are a couple downsides. I'm going to cover them right now. One is the weight. I don't think the Lawman is a super lightweight knife, 5.6 ounces. Keep in mind the 940 previously shown, 3.3? So, you know, well over 2 ounces of difference in carry weight. Also, look at the plan form, i.e. the profile of the folded knife. Okay, you see the difference? This is a very wide carry package. This is what I noticed in my own carry of the knife. It takes up pretty much the whole, at least width-wise, the whole knife pocket on my outstanding 511 Tac-Lite Pro pants. I'll review those sometime. So it's a little bit broad in carry, you know. Even compared to the Spyderco Police G10, you can see it's very broad. Yeah, it's shorter, but that's just something you need to consider. Also, since I'm covering bad things, I said this on the Cold Steel Recon 1 review, that aggressive G10 handle, while very nice to grasp, I love it. It's very tractionable on the hand. I really like it. You guys know I'm a huge fan of that textured, let me say highly textured G10 material. But on the flip side, I just don't know why Cold Steel never gets this right. They continue to do this. They put it under the pocket clip too, which means that as time goes on, that is going to abrade your duty pants pocket and pretty much wear it out, unless you run some JB Weld epoxy job a la Nutnfancy style under there, sand it and smooth it out, which I will probably do if I secure this Lawman for my own use. This one's on loan. That's what I would do. That way it won't rip my pockets up. So there's a couple downsides, might be a couple more as we go along. But there's a lot of good things to talk about the Lawman too. First off, let's talk about that lock mechanism. Again, we've kind of debunked some cold steel lock hype, haven't we, with the cold steel Bushman? Yeah, that's a project that's ongoing. Stay tuned. You'll see more updates about that. And yes, I'll give it a fair shake. Andrew Demko, he's a designer of the Lawman lock. There's a lot of information in the cold steel catalog about it, how the stop pin is shouldered around the blade for increased wear resistance and whatnot. And there's a good picture of it here. Shows you how it works. It looks like a very strong lock mechanism. And I bet you guys that own the Lawman will concur with that. After studying it and using it myself, I would say, you know what? I think it's going to be pretty strong. Time will tell. Time will tell. How about deployment, though? The deployment on this is not super fast. That's what I've noticed about the Lawman. Okay, and we talked about POU for a police officer's knife. Again, the tactical side, emergency defensive use, you want it to be readily available and very easy to deploy, especially under stress. Remember, under stress, our fine motor skills go bye-bye. That's right, and you're left with what you've practiced. I think deploying this knife takes a little bit more effort than the other ones I've shown you. Again, let's bring in the Benchmade 940. This is a knife that pretty much deploys on its own, and I'm talking about the smoothness at which that axis lock comes out. Just a little bit of thumb tension and bam, knife is out. And again, in the review, I mentioned how the Benchmade 940 pretty much sunk my desires to gain or buy more automatic blades. When a knife is this well balanced and so quick, you really don't need an auto blade. It's just not needed. It comes out without it. The Lawman is not like that. It takes more effort to deploy. Also a function of where the thumb stud is in relation to your hand. It just seems like it's a longer arc to bring it out. Now, if you integrate a little bit of wrist snap into it, you can bring it right out. No problem. And that's just something you're going to have to practice. It is a lockback. I talked briefly about the lock mechanism, but I forgot to tell you. Lockback, not a liner lock. A lot of guys will like that. They don't trust liner locks. Don't know why. I've proven that they're fairly strong in the stabbing protocol of the Rat 1 by Ontario. Granted, that's just a very small data point of one knife, but I kind of feel like it's representative. For most uses that a tactical folder knife would be put up against, I think most liner locks are sufficient. Yes, I would prefer a frame lock. In some situations, I prefer a lock back, just like this Lawman. How about the blade? It is a nice steel. I like AUS 8. I've said it many times before. It's a great all-around medium to high quality steel. This is in a drop point hollow ground configuration. The blade length is 3.5 inches long. Again, kind of straddling that big size, the Recon 1, and maybe the smaller size of the Mini Grip that we just talked about. I like the blade shape. Drop points are very functional, as I said in the beginning of the video, both for defensive and cutting, just everyday cutting use. It's got that belly that we can use it in a utility task. Adequately strong tip for piercing, probably again in the emergency defensive role, and it comes very, very sharp out of box. Good job, Cold Steel. Great jimping on the back. For once, a knife has good jimping. The latest ones I've been reviewing, jimping has pretty much sucked or has been completely absent. I think every tactically intended folder should have very purposeful, sharp jimping on the back spine, preferably on the bottom too. I'd really like it if this G10 was textured all the way around the handle slabs. Call me crazy. Lockup is absolutely tight, no movement up, down, side to side. However, with some designs like the AK-47, they do loosen up over time to the point you cannot adjust out the slop. This is your pivot adjustment here. Should you have any side-to-side play, again, I don't detect any whatsoever. Now, this was a matter of some consternation for me. Look at that big, huge cutout in the tang, or the base of the blade of the Lawman. You see that? And that is, again, to accommodate that stop pin right here. That's a big chunk of metal removed from the base of the blade. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not. Granted, I know it's a folding knife. If I want something strong, I should carry a fixed blade. That's kind of how I feel. But, you know, it's a lot of metal. And that's a trade-off, again, to accommodate that locking, that, what do they call it, the triad locking mechanism by Demco. So just be advised, something. That's black coated blade. I like that. That's cool. Don't know how durable it is because I couldn't cut hard with this since it's not my knife yet. So just something to think about. The thumb stud is actually quite nice. No volcano problems on this cold steel Lawman's thumb stud. Love it. Nice traction. And again, you can pop that out quickly. Talked about the pocket clip already, except the shape. That's actually a fairly decent pocket clip, but compared to the standard Benchmade 940, it is inferior. Okay, I've always said those Benchmade clips are just outstanding. They're simple. They're not flared out too much. They're low profile, and they accommodate various thicknesses of pockets readily. Not a showstopper, just a consideration. This is not pivot construction, not a flow-through knife design, obviously with a lock-back design. That means you can get crud in there and you may have to take the knife apart sometime to clean it. Can you do so? Appears to be, yeah, you have some screws there, you can take it off. Not too sure about these pins here though. I don't see screws on either side. Chime in if you know something about that. But if you dunk it in salt water, that would be my recommendation. Another cop blade along the mid-size lines, which this Lawman represents, would be the actually full-size Griptilian by Benchmade. Another one that I've recommended to a lot of police officers in emails around the world. This is a great knife. And how does it stack up against the Lawman? It's interesting kind of comparing the knives, isn't it? I like doing that too in some situations when it plays to what we're trying to discuss, and that is a POU on a cop blade. I think the grip is a much faster blade to deploy. It comes out much more readily than the Lawman, locks up tight, solid, and it's also much lighter. Almost 2 ounces lighter, 3.8 ounces. Okay, and that's with its steel liners in the Zytel handle. So how about the Lawman? I forgot to talk about liners there. They're actually skeletonized. Hardened steel, cold steel tells us. You can see how they're milled out inside. Good job. So they did as much as they could trying to lighten the knife. And there's another big milling on that side. So that's good. Good job skeletonizing it, but still kind of a chunky, kind of a heavier knife. Again, straddling the big and the small size cop blades. Overall, I like the American Lawman. I do think it is a strong blade. It's very sharp. It is a little bit slower into action. It's not a quick blade. If you practice with it over and over again, you'll get very good at it. I find, for me, your mileage may vary, I need a little bit of wrist action to flip it out, not just pure thumb. That might be a player, police officers, if you're looking for the ultimate speed. The Flash 2 is much faster in deployment, much easier, especially if your hand is injured, maybe your wrist is broken. You might have some troubles getting this Lawman out. So, hype notwithstanding, a good blade, if not outstanding, according to my preliminary research and use of it. I do find intriguing that mini Lawman. I think that would be an excellent knife. I might secure that later in the Nutnfancy project, do a review on it. It's only 2.6 ounces with a 2.5-inch blade. I think it would be a wonderful EDC knife. Very cool, has those G10 handles. Strong blade, that's it. American Lawman, Nutnfancy. Hopefully I answered the questions you guys have. Go big, go small, or go mid-range. Choice is yours. We'll see you. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the good ratings. Much appreciated. Whew, out of here.